Hey, we're in the middle of an epic giveaway. Make sure you've entered. I'm here in Mount Rainier National Park, and it is just an absolutely beautiful day. This is a gorgeous park here in Washington State, and I was just hiking that direction, uphill for quite a while, and I got pretty sweaty carrying all of my gear and cameras and tripods. And I thought, you know what, this is the perfect place to talk about the newest version of Sony's RX series. This is the Sony RX100 VI. And in some ways, the updates to this make this review ridiculously easy. I'll spoil it right up front and say why. Why is this review so easy? Well, because simply, if you want this much zoom and this good a quality in a tiny form factor, there is nothing else that comes close. That's the good news, but there's some bad as well. Let's start talking about what I love about this camera first and run down through some specs and then get to those not so love points. So I've had this camera for a couple of weeks now, and I've been taking it with just about everywhere, including some stuff that I don't typically do, but is perfect for a camera like this. Like baseball games, where more professional cameras are often not allowed, a concert, and then of course just walking my dog. I don't typically want to bring along a camera with me, but we've got some really pretty parks just within dog walking distance of my house. So it's really nice to have something this small, this lightweight to bring along. And now the big differentiator of the RX100 VI versus the earlier models is the fact that we have up to 200 millimeters of zoom. There's a catch. Earlier models, not nearly as much zoom, but a much faster aperture, as wide as f1.8 at the wider focal lengths. Now we've got a 24 to 200, but it starts at f2.8 and goes up to f4.5. So again, much better than any competitors you can line this up with, but still, compared to earlier versions of itself, if you don't need that zoom, you're sacrificing some low light capability. But I love the versatility that extra zoom gives you. I've got videos on my channel, and I'm not the only one talking about this, but shooting landscapes with a telephoto makes things much more impressive. And so I've found having out to 200 millimeters here in Rainier National Park, where you're even right up against the mountain, being able to get even that much closer can really impact your pictures and give them the oomph that you're looking for. Wider angle landscapes often just kind of look small and distant. And unless you have some really interesting foreground elements, well, I'm just not as excited about them as those oomph images. I want to talk a little bit more about that quality. This is a 1-inch backside illuminated sensor with an updated pipeline. It delivers some really nice quality images. I saw one of those comments online, the one where they think they know what they're talking about, saying, well, there's been no ISO improvements in these cameras, because if you look at the numerical range that's been published for the last couple of versions of the RX100, it's basically the same. However, if you put these cameras side by side, this latest version does very well at the higher ISOs. I was extremely pleased. 3200 and even 4000 ISO out of this little camera with a 1-inch sensor. That's all pretty impressive. And add on to the fact that it does shoot 4K video, it does shoot that super slow-mo video if you want, or the 120 frames per second at 1080. It's all good news. Now, a couple of these models have had this viewfinder for a while, but this one is improved, and I really like it. The biggest improvement, and it's just such a simple thing, one flick of a little button and it's popped up and ready to go. In earlier versions, you had to pop it up and then pull this out. There were a number of times where I'd bring it up to my eye and everything's blurry. It's really terrible. I might even miss the shot, but then I'd remember to pull it out. I don't have to do that now. Flick, it's ready to go. Now, it might seem a little silly to have a viewfinder on such a small camera, but it really can make a difference. Now, the LCD touchscreen back here, yeah, it's a touchscreen, we'll get to that in just a second, is nice and bright on its brightest mode. I can see it even today in this bright sunlight. But there are times composing an image where you really want to be able to see the image without the distraction or possibly glare or reflection, and this viewfinder allows you to do that. It also really nicely allows you to review your images. Did you get the shot? Did it look as good after you captured it as it did in your mind before you took the picture? And the viewfinder, to me, makes a big difference. Yes, this back here is now a touch screen. And you know, you certainly make some sacrifices in form and function when you have such a small camera. And having a touch screen mostly to move the focus point around, because again, it's that Sony touchscreen, which it's not as nice as most other people's touchscreens. You can't navigate through the menu system. You really just can set your focus point and a few other tasks, but that alone makes this really nice. And when the viewfinder is down, it actually doesn't have to be, but it's a little awkward, you can now flip the LCD touchscreen vertical. So your selfie folks, you're a little bit better off now. Previous models, you were limited to the straight up or down, which I do find useful, but this is certainly nice. If the camera like this is going to replace your phone, it's nice that it's going to give you an option to do good selfies. Another feature I appreciate is the updated autofocusing system. It's impressive, fast enough to keep serious action in focus, and you've got 23 frames per second with an increased buffer size. 23 frames per second, raw. That's pretty impressive as well. But now let's get into the kind of in between the pros and the cons. I mean, yes, you have all that speed, yes, you have that autofocus power, but like many Sonys, once you write that many images into the buffer, while it's clearing, you're locked out of a lot of features and functions of the camera. So it's not a camera that you're going to be shooting sports often and frequently with. Occasionally, capturing your kid or your dog running on the beach, great. But otherwise, be prepared to do a lot of waiting as it clears that buffer. Now, another in between is battery life. I mean, some of you might put battery life solely in the con list because it's pretty terrible, especially when you start shooting video with this. You can watch it drain. I mean, this is a tiny camera and it's a tiny battery in there. So I expect some trade-offs, and what I love about this Sony and many of the Sonys is that you have USB charging. Anytime I'm out for anything longer than a neighborhood walk, I've got one of those little USB batteries with me. And the fact that you can charge this and have one of those in your bag at any time and charge it multiple times over from one of those smallish ones, that's pretty sweet. And that's why I don't firmly put it in the con list, but put it in between. Let's talk about a few other negatives though. I mentioned this at the beginning. I want to reiterate that you're giving up some aperture at the wide end to get that super telephoto. So the older versions, you had f1.8 at 24 millimeters, you're now at f2.8. Makes it a little bit harder to get that nice depth of field, and you really could with early versions, and you still can now, but you certainly have to work at it. Another issue, there's no mic jack. I mean, this camera is spec'd out with some pretty sweet video features. You got S-Log, I mean, you got great 4K video, downsampled from 5K, which even gives you that ability to zoom in a little bit more. Now, for those of you who say, I don't care about 4K, if you're interested in this camera for video features, and you're interested because it's got 200 millimeters, well, if you record at 4K and then publish out at 1080, that is a serious crop in that you can do and still have beautiful video. So that's nice. But without a mic jack, it really kind of limits it to a B camera and quick setups. And right now, you're hearing this waterfall behind me, and it's not too bad because I got a lav mic on, I hope. But if I was using the onboard mic, here I am using the onboard mic, and it's just not as good as if I was able to use a microphone or wire in a lav mic. It just limits your versatility of using this as kind of a vlogging camera if you can't get other sources of audio into it, other than recording separately and combining in post, which is certainly possible, but not the best solution. Oh, not so good. But probably the biggest issue that I have with this camera is, well, its price. At $1,200, that is a very expensive point and shoot. And yes, it's the best, smallest, most zoomy point and shoot you can get, but that's a lot of money to pay. One more thought though. You know, I think Sony did something pretty smart with the Mark VI. Anytime in the past couple of years, people have asked me for my recommendation for best point and shoot, the Sony RX100 series has been at the top of my list. It is one of the best point and shoot cameras you can get. But then I would always kind of follow it up with, well, I don't actually own one though, because, well, even though they're better than my smartphone, they're not that much better that I want to spend as much as they cost and carry around. I mean, this thing's always with me, and sure, if you put them side by side, this is a clear winner, but it's not enough for me to pay that price. But with the Mark VI and having 200 millimeters of zoom, plus the couple of additional video features that are in here, this does become a much more versatile and compelling camera and really sets itself apart from your smartphone that maybe can zoom a tiny bit or not at all for most of them. And although you're not going to become Wildlife Photographer of the Year with this, that extra zoom gives you some really nice options for wildlife, or as I mentioned early on in the video, even for landscapes. This is a very nice camera. The only thing that's going to be tough for many of us is the cost. Spending that much. If you're watching this channel, you probably have a DSLR or mirrorless camera and probably saving for a lens or two. And well, when you look at a nice new lens for your camera or this little pocket point and shoot, it's tough to swallow. But if you're looking for the smallest, most travel-friendly, very versatile camera that has a few drawbacks, this Sony does the trick. I'm going to put a couple of JPEGs along with links to full raw images that you can download and look at yourself that I shot over the last couple of weeks with this camera. And if you plan to purchase this or want to see a couple of alternative options that not quite as good but maybe will save you a bit of money, I link those right down below, and your use of those links greatly helps what we do here at Photorec.tv. And if you appreciated this review, give it a quick thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you're watching this before October 1st, 2018, we are giving away almost $10,000 in prizes and experiences through Photorec.tv, McKay Live, and Photo Enthusiast Network. The link to enter is right down below this video. I hope you'll check it out. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.